Today's Frugal Friday video is the Jackie wristlet from Craftsfullymade. Rita is the designer for Craftsfullymade, and she is one of my favorite designers. She is very thorough. She puts a lot of detail and instructions into her patterns. This pattern is free on her website. I'll have the link in my description. So I highly suggest you grab this free pattern, read over her instructions so you can see how her patterns are written, and look at her other patterns too. I feel like her patterns are really beautiful and unique, and definitely her instructions help you walk through each step. I will be making a few changes in the ways I sew this up. I will try to let you know every change I make. And also she has different options. So the options that I'm choosing in mine, you may want to do the different options that she presents in her pattern. For example, she gives you the option of having your lining be just a simple plain lining or making credit card slots. I actually planned on making the credit card slots, but I accidentally cut out the two lining pieces instead of the credit card slot piece. I didn't want to waste that fabric, so I just decided to make this version without the credit card slots. But if you want to see that demonstrated on camera, just let me know in the comments and I will make another version of this pattern with the credit card slots included. On the back of this wristlet, she gives you two options. One is for zipper overlay, and one is just to cut the opening out of the vinyl and insert the zipper pocket that way. I'm choosing to use the overlay option. This is in the pattern. Just know that there's two ways to do the back zipper pocket. Also, I'm choosing to make my wristlet strap just a little bit fancier. I'm having a two-toned wristlet strap. So both of these pieces I cut to 2 inches wide, and then I just folded the raw edges to the middle and then clipped them together. You can follow the pattern directions for the way she does it definitely if you want to do that. I just thought I would do it this way for mine. I'm going to be adding 2 tags, a cork tag on the front and then a woven label under my zipper overlay. My print today is from J&R Edwards. I'll have my link in the description for it. My zipper tape is from Mormino. I'll have the link for it, as well as the zipper pulls from Altelia Dark Fiber Arts. The zipper pull is a book. It is so detailed. I love it, and it's a very good weight. It's a solid piece. It's not flimsy at all. I love their zipper pulls. They're some of my favorites. The pattern calls for 1/2 inch for the D-ring and the swivel hook, but I did not have 1/2 inch in the color I wanted. I wanted to use kind of a gunmetal, and so I did opt to use a 3/4 inch for this piece. Other than that, let's go ahead and get started and watch how this adorable wristlet comes together. The first thing the pattern has you do is to make your D-ring connector piece. So I'm making mine out of a cotton woven, but she does give you the directions to do this out of a vinyl as well. The first thing you're going to do on this piece is you're going to draw 2 lines from the short edge. So here's my first line, here's my second line. She gives you the measurements for those in the pattern. Then you simply fold the raw edge to that line. I'm just going to add a clip on this piece, but honestly what I do typically is I just do this over the iron, run a little bit of a glue stick here, and then fold it and press, and that's how I make mine. But since I'm on camera, not at my iron, I'm just going to do it this way. Fold the raw edge to the other side as well. And then I'm going to fold these long edges to the middle line. So here is how that D-ring connector looks. If you use my method with the glue stick, or if you use Rita's method with the double-sided tape, it's really simple to put it together. It's a little trickier if you don't have any adhesive because things want to unfold. But once you have it looking like this, then you're just going to top stitch all the way around so that everything is connected and laying flat. As always, when I do my top stitching, I do it 1/8 inch away. I always back stitch when I start and stop. The next thing you'll do is you'll make your holes for your rivets. The pattern tells you how far from the short edge you make it, and you'll make one on this side and then one on the other side. I'll do that step off camera, but I'm going to go ahead and just slip my D-ring on, clip my rivet placement piece. This is from your pattern. It's the template, and I'm going to set this aside so I have it for later. I'm also going to set aside my strap. I won't be sewing the strap right now because it is sewn in a later step, and I'm trying to follow along with the pattern. The front of this bag is really the star of the show. I'm going to show you what my version is going to look like. I have a lower panel, a middle panel, and then an upper panel. These are meant to be contrasting prints, but you could definitely do them all the same color if you would like to. And then you have two side panels, and the side panels, this panel is supposed to match this panel. Doesn't have to be that way, but this is the way mine's going to look. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to work on my side panels. This is considered my inner side panel. This is considered my outer side panel. I'm simply going to place them right sides together. She gives you pattern pieces for every piece. So you have a pattern piece for your side panels, but you also have the pattern piece for your interfacing too. See, I have interfacing on the back of all these pieces. It's a Decaville Light equivalent. I use Royal Pixie Heavy for my equivalent. I feel like it works great and the price is really good. So let's go ahead and sew these two pieces together first, and then we will top stitch. I'm just matching them up, and I'm going to sew down the side with the seam allowance given the pattern. These should be the same size. If there's any discrepancy, it's just a cutting error. Now that I have these two pieces sewn together, I'm going to open them up and I'm going to push this seam towards the outer side panel piece. So you can see I'm pushing it over there, and I'm actually going to be top stitching on that outer side panel. I'll do my top stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge. Now let's go back and attach these two panels together. So this is the upper and this is the middle, and we're going to attach those two along this curved edge here. So I'm going to place them right sides together, and we should be able to sew them to get them to match up with the seam allowance given the pattern. You can see I'm not clipping them together because we're going to have to kind of arc our sewing and kind of curve along this edge. The designer tells you it's a good idea to mark your centers here, use double-sided tape, whatever you feel comfortable with. You can see you should be sewing right up against your stabilizer. And what I'm doing while I'm curving this is I'm just sewing a few stitches at a time and constantly making sure that both edges are meeting right there at my seam allowance guide. That's the main thing, is that both pieces are together just for the stitch or two that I'm taking, and then I'll just readjust again. Once we have those sewn together, we're going to press this seam allowance to the middle panel and top stitch along the middle piece. Just flattening it out, smoothing it, and then I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away again. So here's how the upper and the middle look. Here is my two side pieces. So we're getting everything sewn together. Now I need to attach this section to this lower. But before I do that, I'm going to add the tag on. I just have a little bit of glue holding it in place, but I'm going to go ahead and top stitch all around my tag. Now that I have the tag sewn on, I'm just going to take these two pieces, place them right sides together again. You can see that it's not going to match up, so I'm going to have to do the same stitching I did earlier. I start by putting these two pieces in alignment and then matching it up with my seam allowance. So that is how I start first. And then as I'm sewing, I'll just take a stitch or two at a time and then readjust. You're going to be sewing right up against that interfacing again, so you kind of have that as a guide too, but the main things to do is to watch your seam allowance and make sure your edges are matched up. Don't worry about how the rest of it looks, just make sure these two pieces are together and you sew a stitch or two straight, and then you can kind of curve and adjust as you need to. Now that we have that sewn together, we're going to once again push the seam allowance down, so now it's against that lower panel. I'm going to finger press that down, and you can see how beautifully it looks. I'm going to top stitch along this bottom piece. So now that you have this orientated the way you want, you can see that everything is matching up perfectly. You're just going to flip this piece right sides together, your side panels on top of this main piece, and now we're going to sew down that side to connect these pieces with the seam allowance given in the pattern. At this point, I'm going to flip this so that the seam allowance is going to stay under this inner side panel, and that is where I'm going to top stitch. So now I have this front done. It looks so good. For a free pattern, I love this detail that she put in it. It's so beautiful. So I'm going to set this aside and we're going to start working on the back piece. For my back piece, I'm choosing to add the zipper pocket with the overlay piece. There's other options if you don't want to use an overlay piece, but I felt like this would be a really cute way to do it, so I'm just going to do mine this way. I do have a tag added here at the bottom. This is a woven label from Sewing Blurbs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all around the perimeter of this overlay to get it attached to this back panel piece. So on this piece, I do have my woven interfacing, a Royal Pixie Light, and then I do have the stabilizer kept out of the seam allowance, which is the Royal Pixie Heavy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the machine and top stitch all around this outer perimeter of the overlay, just an 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. My vinyl that I used for this overlay was way too stretchy for me to use for overlay without doing some interfacing. Didn't really think about it too much, but it did cause some distortion, and so I'll tell you, if your vinyl is stretchy on this piece, go ahead and stabilize it before you start sewing it on, and it'll just make your sew more enjoyable. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece, fold it wrong sides together so I can get a snip started here in the middle. Once I get that started, I'll go ahead and come to the back, and then I start cutting and get my scissors in between the overlay and this material. I want to be about 1/4 of an inch away from my stitches and trim all around there. You're going to have to go slow in this step because you definitely would not want to cut into your overlay. If you have really good scissors, you can kind of just glide along instead of cutting, and that would make it a little bit less of a risk that you would cut through your overlay piece. This is how your back panel looks from your front. If you're doing my version with the overlay, this is how it looks from the back. I'm going to set this piece aside, and now we're going to work on that zipper pocket piece so we can add it to this back piece. I'm going to let you know that I do my zipper pocket a little bit different. I apologize, you can follow along with the pattern, but I feel like it yields the same results, and this one's just easier for me. I'm going to go ahead and place this zipper tape right sides up. My lining piece is right sides up, and then I'm just going to sew along here with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to get these two pieces attached together. Now that I have that first side done, I'm going to repeat those same steps with the other side. I am going to have to cut down the bottom of this piece. We are leaving our opening here in this zipper pocket. So now that we have this piece completed, we're going to attach it to the back panel. I have my zipper closing to the left. I have this larger portion on top. I'm going to take my back panel and lay it on top. My back panel is right sides up. The lining is wrong sides up, but you can see the zipper is the correct orientation, so it's right sides up. You can use double-sided tape, you can use clips, you can use whatever you want, but what my main goal is to have this lining piece centered on the back panel piece, and then the zipper tape I want centered in the opening. So I want an equal amount of zipper tape showing on both sides so that the teeth are actually centered in the middle. I don't use any clips or anything like that. All I do is take it over to the sewing machine, and then I just adjust as I need to. We already know that my vinyl's a little bit stretchy, so I'm going to be very careful to sew this slowly. I can lengthen my stitch length if I feel like I need to help myself get a little bit of a better stitch, so there's less pulling and dragging on my zipper foot. This time I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch away on the inside perimeter, the inside raw edge of this overlay piece. Now that I have that inside stitching done all around this overlay, what I can do is I can turn this over, and I'm just going to pull that top piece down so that it matches the bottom. I'm going to press everything flat and add a few clips along the sides just to hold it into place. Now I'm going to flip this piece back over, pull back that exterior piece, and then I'm going to just sew down the sides. And now that I have that sewn, I'm just going to trim up the overhang on my sides, but I also have a little bit to trim up on the bottom. The technique given in the pattern does kind of help you to angle in these sides a little bit, so it's a little easier to turn, but I don't feel like I have much problem turning, so I'm just going to leave mine wide open, and then I'll just deal with it at the end whenever I'm ready to close up this pocket. So now I have my back piece, I have the front piece, and for me, my lining pieces are staying just simple like this. If you're doing your credit card slots, you would do them next. The next step will be to grab out my zipper tape. This is the main zipper closure on the bag. So on one end, I have my edges folded 90 degrees. I'm just going to sew down the sides to tack that down. And then I also have a raw edge zipper tab. This is vinyl, and I just have it folded over this end. I already have my zipper pull on. If you're using fabric for this piece, make sure you follow the pattern instructions and do not leave a raw edge. So let's top stitch across this edge here to connect this piece, and then let's also tack down our 90-degree angles on our zipper tape. Make sure you follow the pattern directions for what size to cut the zipper tape. On this next step, to attach the zipper and to have it on both the exteriors and the lining, she gives you a couple different tips and tricks. She does have you using double-sided tape, quite a bit of double-sided tape in these steps. Please feel free to follow that and use the double-sided tape. I just don't use it, so this is what's easier for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull out a lining piece, have it right sides up, and I'm going to center my tape, have it right sides up, but have the pull closing to the right, because this is going to be the front. I'm going to use this piece to be the front, and if I had it going the other way, it wouldn't work out right. And so I am having my zipper pull closing to the right. I have it all along this top edge. The raw edges are aligned, and I have it centered. Now what I'm going to do is just a basting stitch just to attach these two pieces together, and then I'm going to add the front exterior. Now pull out that front exterior piece, have it right sides up. Go ahead and place the lining right sides together so it'll be right sides down. Your zipper tape at this point will be closing to the left. You're going to match up this top edge, and you're going to sew with the full seam allowance. I want to sew from one side all the way to the other to get these pieces connected. I still haven't trimmed up that bottom curve. I'm going to have to do that before I flip these. So now that I have those pieces connected, go ahead and make for sure that your zipper pull is closing the way you want. So now what you're going to do is the designer gives us a couple of tips here. We want to try to reduce some bulk in these steps. So we are going to only be sewing through the exterior. Our lining's going to be up. But we need our seam allowance to go down, but we have quite a bit of bulk here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to butterfly this seam, and she tells you you can use double-sided tape at this step. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make a small snip here. I'm not snipping through the stitches, just that area. This will allow me to keep this part butterflied, but the rest of the seam will go down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to top stitch from one side to the other. So let's start on this side. Butterfly the seam for that little bit and go ahead and top stitch there. And then make sure the rest of the seam allowance is going down. Probably for me it's going to be from zipper tab to the zipper end that the seam allowance will be going down, and I'll be sewing through it. So here I am past that zipper tape again. I'm going to butterfly that seam. So at this point, I'm only sewing the exterior seam down. The lining seam is going back to the lining. So this is how the first side looks. She does have an option for you to have a row of double-sided tape here, and then after you get everything put together, you compress the lining down so you have less risk of it getting in the way of the zipper. That is something you can do if you like to use double-sided tape. I have been trying to get more used to not having this row of top stitching here so that I have less bulk and everything looks a little bit neater at the end, and I've not had any problems with the lining getting caught in my zipper, which is an irrational fear of mine, I believe. Go ahead and take out your other lining piece, have it right sides up, lay this panel with the zipper right sides up on top of it. So now we'll connect these two pieces, and just so you can see, everything is right sides up and your linings are right sides together. I'll add a clip or two here, making sure everything is centered and looks evenly spaced. And I'm just going to do that basting stitch again. I'm going to take this back exterior piece, place it right sides together with the front exterior piece, match up everything along that top edge, add a few clips just to secure it. You can use double-sided tape. And I'm going to start sewing just like I did on the last one, from one edge to the other with the seam allowance in the pattern. Again, I'm going to make a tiny snip just before I get to the zipper tape, but within my seam allowance. I definitely don't want to cut through any stitches, and this will just allow me to butterfly those end pieces so I have a little bit of a smoother seam there whenever we're sewing over it. Separate the exterior from the lining. Start on this side, go ahead and butterfly the seam here, but the rest of the time the seam will be going down. So you're sewing on your back exterior piece. The exterior seam allowance only is here at this point. When I get to my zipper, I'm going to make for sure the seam allowance is going down. It is. Continue sewing to tack that seam allowance down to the back piece. As I'm getting close to that zipper tab, I'll separate or butterfly those seams where I made that snip, and then just sew through the exterior piece. Here's how that looks with that little bit of butterflying on the edges. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my zipper pulls, since they're kind of big, are halfway in the middle, just so I don't have to worry about my needle hitting them. We are going to grab our two exterior pieces, clip them right sides together, and then we will do the same thing with the lining. I'm going to add a few clips just to have everything kind of staying in line. Don't have to worry too much about shifting. You can see how much better that butterfly goes. It just looks a little bit neater there. I can already see it. I'm going to add a clip directly in my seam because I really want to try to keep that seam looking even and straight. Even if I would have more overhang at the bottom, I would deal with that instead of having the seam look badly. Come down to the lining, do the same thing, clip all the way around. Here is this seam, match it up, put the clip there. If you're someone who struggles with getting these side pieces to match up, you can just do a baste across the two sides before you sew the rest of the bag together. If it would be a really bulky bag with a lot of like heavy materials like vinyl and things, I would definitely do that. With this, I feel like I should have minimal shifting, but we'll see. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave an opening here. Yes, we still have the opening here in the pocket, but we're going to turn through this opening and then close it up through this. So we have the benefit of having a large opening to turn everything through, but we won't see this opening because we'll close it through our lining pocket. So now what I'm going to do is start sewing on my lining side first. I'm going to take a bigger seam allowance when I'm sewing with my lining, just to ensure it's not as baggy as it will be whenever we're looking at it from the lining. So a bigger seam allowance here, and then I'll gradually just shift down to the smaller seam allowance as we get close to the top, making sure that whenever I'm going over this part, I'm already at that smaller seam allowance. I'm getting close to the top, so I'm going to start shifting over. I'm fully at the smaller seam allowance whenever I cross over that top seam. I've just crossed over this seam on the exterior, so let's go ahead and go to that bigger seam allowance. I'm trimming up a little bit of the overhang I had on the exterior and then trimming down these lining seams just a little bit, just so it's about even as the exterior seams. Now it's time to attach that D-ring connector. Here's the D-ring connector I made in the beginning. I went off camera and made the holes for the rivets. Just as a side note, this template you get is not for your piece. The placement for the rivets is given in the pattern. After you make those rivet holes, set that aside, grab out that pattern piece now, and what you're going to do is you're going to go to the side where the zipper closes. I'm going to stick my hand inside, and I'm going to place that center seam, the seam of these two side pieces, directly matching with the seam on this pattern piece. I'm going to make sure it's lining up here at the top as well, and I'm going to use a marking tool to make a dot on this side, come over and make for sure that this side's lined up at the top and make a dot here. Then what you're going to do is you're going to pull out your hole punch, or if you want to use your hand press, you can do that. But for me, it's easier to use it this way, but you are going to shimmy this lining fabric over that throat piece, kind of bunch it up around there, and you're going in between your exterior and your lining. So you can see my rivet press is in there. I'm only punching the hole through the exterior. So I place my hole punch directly on that mark I made and then just make my hole here. I do that same thing on the other side. So now I have two holes here. I have two holes on my connector piece. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this connector piece and line it up with one of the holes. I'm going to push one rivet through one side, one rivet through the side of the bag. Use that opening here in the middle. You can pull it all the way out so you can see your post, and snap the other side onto that post. Then I'm going to take my D-ring, slide it on, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side with the other rivet. I go through one side, go through the other side, go in. I can see that other post there. Add the other side of the rivet. And that is how my D-ring connector looks. It's a really simple way to do this, but I feel like it's such a classy look to it. I'm going to go off camera and press my two rivet snaps into place. Before I do that, I will go ahead and sew together my strap just so we can get that wristlet out of the way. Now, if you make a wristlet strap, typically what you'll do is you'll put it wrong sides together, open it up, and sew across there. I'm not going to do that with this one, so I'll have to tuck my edges in. If my edges are too thick, I will cover them with another piece of vinyl. So just be aware, if you don't want those extra steps, you might not want to do it this way. But for me, since I have the two pieces wrong sides together with just a single fold, I'm going to go down both sides with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and if I feel like it needs it, I might do a 1/4 of an inch as well, so 1/8 and 1/4 for 2 rows of stitching. Let's go ahead and use that swivel hook. My swivel hook is 1 inch, and like I said, I cut my strap both of my strap pieces were 2 inches. When folded in the middle, it gave me a 1 inch strap. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, once I have my swivel hook slid on, I'm going to let this be my exterior and this be my lining. I'm going to fold down one edge, slip this under, and now I just want to see if this is too thick to fold under again, and I truly feel like it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go cut another piece of vinyl to match just to cover this, and so then I'll come back and show you how I'll complete it. If you're not using vinyl, if you're just using a cotton woven, you could fold yours under and have a finished edge, but mine's just really, it would be really too thick. My domestic machine would not like that. So let's go ahead and cut this, press our rivet snaps down, and then we'll come back to finish this. This is looking so great. I'm really enjoying this free pattern. So I pressed my snaps flat and I went ahead and cut out a small zipper tab. I'm going to keep it raw edge. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open it up. So this is how it looks at this moment. But I know I'm sewing on domestic. I'm not going to try to do anything fancy and sew through too many layers. Slide your swivel hook out of the way. Clip this on and let's just sew through one layer of the strap and one zipper end, and then I'll show you how I attach this just to make it easier for me. If you have an industrial machine, of course you don't have to do these extra steps. This is just for those of us that sew on a domestic machine and are using vinyl on our strap. So now that I have that edge sewn, that is going to be my finished edge. So we're going to slide that swivel hook down, just like we had it a minute ago. And now we have this finished edge. We're going to tuck this directly underneath here. And now I'm not even going to try to sew through all those layers. I'm going to sew right above that section, because if I sew over where I have this extra piece of vinyl, that's 2 more layers of vinyl I'm sewing through. I have a bigger risk of having a skipped stitch if I do that. I'm not going to worry about that, and I'm going to go above. So what I did was I didn't even sew on that tab because I knew that would be more layers of vinyl. So I sewed right above it, but you can see it still looks like a really nice, really good wristlet. So now we have an opening in the lining and the opening in the zipper pocket. Let's go ahead and pull this lining, push it through, and push it out through that zipper pocket. So now here is the opening in the lining. Let's go ahead and just close it shut. We just sew straight across here, and then I can trim up that overhang. But make sure you back stitch when you start and stop. Keep that same seam allowance that you were sewing with earlier. The stitches should meet. Tuck the lining back in. So our lining looks great. Now we just need to close up the lining in the zipper pocket. I'm going to take the time to close it up evenly, so I'm going to spread my seams, butterfly them open, and then just start folding it down and matching everything up. I'm probably going to fold everything down about 1/4 of an inch, but you could definitely do more. I start with the side seams because I feel like that just gives me the best look and the best way to get it all pulled together. Once I have those 2 side seams, I just start pulling on them, just kind of gently tugging on them. Things are wanting to fold in, and clip the sides together. Do it again and just keep going along that path. This is how it looks clipped. Let's sew straight across there with just 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to close up the zipper pocket lining. After you have your zipper pocket lining sewn together, go ahead and push it down. Take the time to really push those corners in there so it lays nice and flat. You want to make sure that you have that lining tucked in nicely. You can see the lining does fit really snugly. Everything looks great. Let's close everything up. Probably going to put a clip on this seam to kind of press it down. I'll do that off camera, but you can see that's a little bunchy there, so I'll probably kind of compress that for a while so it lays nice and flat, but for right now it's still perfectly fine. Close up your pocket on the back. Look at how adorable this wristlet turned out. This to me does not look anything like a free pattern. It is a very high-end pattern. You could definitely sell these at craft shows, give them as gifts, and people would be thrilled. This is a great free pattern to get. I could not believe when Rita came out with it as a free pattern. I think a lot of people even try to talk her into selling it, but she named this the Jackie Wristlet after her mother, and she did not want to take any compensation for it. Love her so much. She's so kind, and she's just the sweetest thing ever. You can see everything looks great. In my description, I'm going to have the link for how you get this pattern. You get this pattern on her website, so even if you're not on Facebook, you'll still get the free pattern. My prints are from Jane R. Edwards. I will have that link as well as the link for the zipper tape, the zipper pulls, the interfacing I use. The vinyls are older vinyls. I have no idea where they came from. They've been in my stash for years, so I don't know where those came from. Cork tag is Heartwood and Hide. Woven label is from Sewing Blurbs. And everything just came together to make a gorgeous wristlet. Thank you so much for watching another Frugal Friday video of mine. I am very thankful you are here. I'm very thankful you're watching. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. And I'd love to see your version of this if you sew it up. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.